Welcome everyone to the Summer 2016 Intuit QuickBooks Virtual Accounting Conference. This is the session on QuickBooks Online Troubleshooting. My name is William Murphy. Most of you know me as Murph. I'll be hosting this session, and I know what you're thinking. Murph is a QBO, or is a desktop guy, not a QBO guy. But while I'm considered a desktop guru, I am trying my best to learn more and more about the guts of QuickBooks Online. And that's why I've been studying the QuickBooks API and QuickBooks Online errors. And that's why I am hosting today's session. So let me remind you that this course is certified for CPE credits. You must stay for the entire session during the training. There'll be a number of CPE keywords that will be posted. And at the end, you'll be given a quiz where you can respond and list each of those keywords. And if you successfully list all the keywords, you'll be eligible for 1 1/2 hours of CPE. And your CPE certificate will be mailed directly to you within 3 weeks to the same email address you used to register. You must keep a copy for your records, and you'll be able to use that when Intuit opens the ACE certification. The learning objectives for this course include identifying the major categories of QuickBooks Online errors, recognizing the safeguards and limitations of the QBO database, identifying troubleshooting techniques for conversion errors, operational errors, banking errors, and payroll errors, and identifying the various tools that can be used for safeguarding, troubleshooting, and manipulating QuickBooks Online data. We want to begin by looking at a database perspective that contrasts QBO with QuickBooks Desktop. And we'll be looking at both the safeguards and limitations of the QBO database. So this slide compares and contrasts the various safeguards that exist within QuickBooks Desktop and QBO. First, QuickBooks Desktop has a higher degree of data accessibility, while QuickBooks Online has a lesser degree of data accessibility. Now, when we talk about data accessibility, what we're really discussing is the ability to freely access all the aspects of the data. And you'll see that even though QuickBooks Online is an open database from a platform standpoint, there are significant controls in the use of that data. QuickBooks Desktop has a lower degree of data integrity, while QuickBooks Online has a higher degree of data integrity. And the degree to which we limit accessibility or we control accessibility in QuickBooks Online is what gives us a higher degree of integrity. QuickBooks Desktop has a lower degree of data connectivity support. We all know that the SDK has kind of been stable over the last few years, and there's not as much support for the SDK for QuickBooks Desktop. And Intuit has placed its focus in QuickBooks Online, and so there's much greater connectivity support being provided by Intuit for the QBO product. The desktop also has a lower degree of connectivity conformity, while QuickBooks Online has a high degree of connectivity conformity. Now, what I mean by that is almost anybody can take the QuickBooks Desktop SDK and with just a few specific regulations or requirements, they can access your data. And there's nothing that ensures that they're meeting all of the requirements of the SDK once they access your data. So it potentially poses a greater degree of potential corruption than in QuickBooks Online. But QuickBooks Online has this high degree of connectivity conformity. Everyone must conform to the same API standards, and you can't access the data until you do conform to those standards. So that ensures the integrity of your QuickBooks Online data. Now, at the same time, we want to look at the limitations associated with both QuickBooks Desktop and QuickBooks Online. And there is a distinct relationship between the safeguards and the limitations. QuickBooks Desktop has a greater access to more of the data, while QuickBooks Online has limited access to some of the data, but those areas, those functionalities are improving all of the time. QuickBooks Desktop has limited access to little of the data. There are some SDK limitations as to what data you can get to. And currently, there are some areas of QuickBooks Online that have no access because of API limitations. But once again, those areas are improving. QuickBooks Desktop has greater ability to use data for reporting and integration, and QuickBooks Online has limited ability to use the data for reporting and integration. You can't just go grab the data and use it with any old reporting mechanism. However, there are improvements in the number of apps that are now using QuickBooks Online data for reporting and integration purposes. And we'll be looking at some of those towards the end of today's presentation. We also want to now compare the safeguards and limitations of QuickBooks Online. And in this slide, we're not taking into consideration the desktop at all. The real basis for both of these safeguards and limitations came as a result of the complete redesign of QuickBooks Online a few years ago in the project known as Harmony, which was the code name for the new QBO that most of us know today. Intuit's Harmony project set out to create a platform built on a cohesive design principle, frameworks, and patterns. Functionally, the QuickBooks API provides a link to the open platform. In reality, there's two APIs, the Accounting API and the Payments API. And developers can use either or both APIs depending on their needs. The Accounting API is the core API for integrating QuickBooks Online. Developers who want their app to access the customer's QuickBooks Online company must make use of the Accounting API. The Payments API is used for e-commerce functionality and credit card processing, but it must be combined with the Accounting API if the developer is going to also link those transactions to QuickBooks Online. The Accounting API is a set of coding components and web services that enable an app to securely connect to a QuickBooks Online company file. App users can connect their QuickBooks Online company file from a QuickBooks Online API-enabled app and then sign in with their Intuit account and instantly have their QBO data available to them and their new app. In reality, it's the API that provides the safeguards we admire in QBO, but also imposes limitations that some users would prefer their third-party developers not be limited by. With that said, I must mention that several of the areas limited in the terms of functionality, as we've seen, are improving essentially every month. So, how else is QuickBooks Online different from QuickBooks Desktop? I mean, they're both accounting software. How different could they be? Well, night and day probably describes it best. While the core purpose is the same, that being to record debits and credits, That's where the similarities end for the most part. From a purely technical standpoint, they're drastically different. Desktop, while loved by millions, is what might be described by Seth Brundle in that movie The Fly as clunky at best. Desktop, in so many ways, is a hodgepodge of application this code and application that code, and database this and database that. I mean, that is why even though QB Desktop is now based upon the Sybase database, we still on rare occasions see C index error messages popping up. That's the hodgepodge effect. But as I mentioned a moment ago, QBO, as we know it today, was completely redesigned a few years back, and it's been growing in leaps and bounds ever since, but always actually within the same platform design. And that's because the platform was designed with functionality and growth in mind. Additionally, the QBO platform was built with the premise that outside developers should be able to easily establish apps that could work with and extend QBO features and functionality. That's why much of the platform is opened by the QBO API. Let's spend a few minutes talking about what makes QBO unique in design from the desktop. This slide shows differences in some of the various tables used in QuickBooks Desktop and QuickBooks Online. While the particulars of the specific tables are not really all that important, I'll call your attention to the table in the upper right corner of this slide. Now, the fact that QB Desktop has more than 150 tables and QBO has only 83 tables, at least at the time I prepared this slide, isn't necessarily a bad thing. While we all recognize that QBO does not contain all of the feature set that are found in QB Desktop, one reason that the number of tables can be lower is because of the improved design and list and table variations permitted in QBO that are not even possible within the database structure of QuickBooks Desktop. So let's look a little deeper into QuickBooks Online data formatting. In order to do this, we're going to talk about some basic concepts. So hopefully everyone's seeing my slide change. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, I don't want us to get all hung up in the QuickBooks Online tables because I'm trying to emphasize the conceptual differences between QBO and QB Desktop in this session. But I do want to take just a moment to call a substantial difference in actual table design. If you've been to my Super Geek classes covering QuickBooks Desktop, you know that one of the major points I make concerns the fact that QuickBooks Desktop transactions contain header records that capture what we might think of as the basics of a transaction. And those records are stored in one table, and that the details or line items of a transaction are stored in a different table, with each line item actually encompassing a different row of data in that table. So a check might have one header row in the header table and can have any number of detail lines of data in the check detail table. But if we look at this table from QBO, we'll notice that both the core information, what in Desktop we call the master record, is included in the table, as well as the line details, what in Desktop we call the target records. QBO supports two list types, basic lists and complex lists, both shown here. Unlike QuickBooks Desktop, in which a single list design within the database was re-engineered via the application interface to appear as what we have known for the past several years as centers, the overall QBO platform conforms the application and data design into the same architecture. I want to illustrate this point one step further. If any of you have supported QuickBooks POS over the last 5 years, you know that it's undergone several different configurations. Well, a couple of years back, we actually had a POS user interface that sat on top of the old interface. You could be looking at a list in POS, and with a trick or two, you could actually bring to the foreground the original and still underlying list design. That's not what happened in QBO. I'll say again that the application and data design being used in QBO employ the same architecture, meaning that what you see in QBO is what also lies behind the scenes. So basic QBO lists, like the one on the left, contain a set of items displayed in rows where each item is represented as a table, as a text label. Depending on the purpose of the list, each row may also be accompanied by a control. QBO was configured so that users could select a row to perform an action on the corresponding item. In desktop, lists only display data. They don't have action functionality. Now, complex lists in QBO, as shown in the example on the right, contain a set of items displayed in rows where each item is represented as a text label. The rows in a complex list contain multiple pieces of information for each item beyond just the item label. Depending on the purpose of the list, each row may also be accompanied by a control. This list style is often used in the split view layouts as seen here. Complex lists are typically used when the user can benefit from viewing more information about each list item without needing to select an item within the list. Now let's turn our attention to tables for just a moment. If you've ever attended my Super Geek courses, you know that the QuickBooks tables are the guts of the database. They represent the structure that accommodates your accounting data. While they serve the same purpose in QBO, both their design and interface are much friendlier. That's the word I'll use to describe it, so as to help both users and developers make sense of large amounts of data. In order to do this, QBO tables consist of three different modes: a default mode, a batch action mode, and an edit mode. Again, in recent years, the QuickBooks desktop development team has provided some emulation of this design element in the user interface, even though the underlying data tables remain unchanged. We can see such evidence in the batch delete void transaction feature in QuickBooks Accountant. QBO tables were based on a user's need to understand, manipulate, and edit a group of text-based information within the same content structure. The tables in QBO were configured with sorting, filtering, and grouping in mind. Settings associated with tables can either be temporary or retained for viewing of the table at later times. At a minimum, the QBO table includes a header and rows of content. It may include sorting and filtering and grouping by categories, selecting items, indicating status, customizing, editing, and pagination. These features are not necessarily mutually exclusive. For example, table may be both sortable and also allow for item selection. Table settings may include adjusting the number of rows visible, showing and hiding columns, or changing the table type. Live filtering and find is used to filter content as soon as the user makes a selection. In order to streamline workflow, QBO was designed with batch action in mind, rather than one-by-one edits that are so much a part of QuickBooks Desktop. Table batch action mode allows the user to take action on one or multiple rows. A user can easily select items on a page and apply actions to all of the items at once. Now here's another great feature that QBO offers that Desktop doesn't. Occasionally, we have errors pop up. And to help the user understand what's happening, an error message is actually associated with the inline data. The error logic is inherent in QuickBooks Online. In desktop, a similar type occurrence might in fact generate a runtime error that results in the program shutting down. This type of error reporting is just another example of how QuickBooks Online is changing QuickBooks for the better. So now, let's look at identification and troubleshooting of some of the errors you might experience in QuickBooks Online. We're going to cover 4 different types of QBO errors today: conversion errors, operational message errors, banking errors, and payroll errors. These are by no means the only kinds of errors you may encounter, but they tend to be the most common. There are actually more than 370 errors which I've identified, but we certainly will not be looking at all of them, but we're going to discuss examples of each. There are a wide variety of errors you may encounter when attempting to import data from QuickBooks Desktop into QuickBooks Online. For the most part, the errors we're going to look at today are systemic or systematic errors associated with conversion. They're not accounting issues, although that some of these conversion errors can impact your accounting data. So, here's our first error. Please delete all employees already entered in QuickBooks Online. QuickBooks Online has detected that you have activated payroll features. These can include e-services, direct deposit, and billing holds. And when this error pops up, we have a conflict in the fact that there is payroll data, or in some cases, no payroll data in your desktop, and yet QuickBooks Online already shows payroll-related data. If you've activated payroll features or imported payroll previously, you have to create a new QuickBooks Online account in order to deal with this error. And then you'll have to import your desktop data into the new account. You can't import desktop data containing payroll once payroll has already been configured in QBO. So here's another error. Export QuickBooks Desktop data to QBO and you just get this warning error message. This is typically associated with a file path. If your QuickBooks Desktop file is stored too deeply in the Windows architecture, more than 5 folders deep, you'll get this message. You're going to have to close QuickBooks Desktop. You're going to have to relocate the file. Typically, the best place is to directory on your Windows desktop, and then you can go through the loading process again. There's another message about a script error. This is fairly simple to resolve. Simply select No, and you'll go ahead and continue the QuickBooks Online loading process. And that brings us to our first CPE keyword. And that keyword is Molecule Man. Now, I didn't develop these keywords, but I know who did. And she's got science on the mind. And so just remember that the first keyword is Molecule Man. You'll want to write this down so that when you take the quiz at the end of the session today, you will be ready to proceed and select Molecule Man as the first CPE keyword. These keywords will not be repeated, so make sure you record Molecule Man as the first CPE keyword. So the next QBO conversion error we want to look at occurs when your screen freezes and you are getting a 503 error. The easiest way to solve this is to start a new QBO account. If you start a new account, don't forget to cancel your old one. And in this message, QuickBooks Online encountered a system error while exporting your company file. Your company file has not been exported. You may see this error from QuickBooks Desktop when you go to File, Utilities, Copy Company File for QuickBooks Online. Even though the data file may be damaged, it may be possible to restore your data by first using the verify and then, if necessary, using the rebuild. And we suggest that you attempt that before attempting to otherwise reload your data. Here's a message: your file is too big. And you get this message when the number of targets in your QuickBooks Desktop file exceeds 350,000. That is an inherent limitation in your QuickBooks Desktop file size. And if you have more than 350,000 targets, you're going to need to take steps in order to reduce your file size. That might include condensing your file or splitting your file and only uploading a portion of your file, or maybe just starting a new file in QuickBooks Online by transferring your lists and then bringing in your trial balance as of a starting period. Here's an error that's associated with determining import eligibility. This is an issue with QuickBooks Online Payroll account services, typically because the payroll module is failing to sync with the QuickBooks account itself. The easiest way to fix this is to start a new QuickBooks Online account. You need to make sure that you have all of your payroll intact and everything up to snuff before you attempt to import your desktop data into QuickBooks Online. Now, if you're attempting to convert from Mac, you can sometimes see this error, which is that they were unable to process your data, and you simply kind of get this generic. This can be fixed by updating to the latest Mac release. And it's rare that this error is caused by data corruption, but in some cases it might be necessary to rebuild your Mac data. Here's a message that you will get if your QuickBooks desktop data is actually stored on a network drive. You can't actually upload your data from a network drive. You have to have your data on the local machine you're trying to run the upload from. And so you'll need to copy your QuickBooks desktop to the local machine in order to perform the upgrade. Error 500, possible data damage, file needs to be rebuilt. But when you see this message, you need to proceed with caution. That's your MRF tip for today. Proceed with caution. Don't simply rebuild your data just because you got this message. There are a variety of data integrity problems in your QBW file that can cause this error. So you need to run the verify first, then you need to examine the QB win log. You need to resolve the problems that must be resolved manually, and only if it's safe to rebuild your data, then should you rebuild your data. Clearly, there are instances in which some types of errors are actually made worse by the rebuild process, specifically encryption and decryption errors. So you need to resolve those problems manually before you ever run the rebuild, or you'll actually compound those problems. But when you get this message, remember, don't simply immediately proceed to rebuilding your desktop data. Run the verify, then check the QB win log, and only when it's safe, run the rebuild. Once you get a clear message from rebuild and verify, then you're ready to proceed, once again, with attempting to upload your data to QBO. Here's another error. There was a problem copying your company file to QuickBooks Online. Now, there are a variety of reasons why you'll get this message, and generally this is the message that's displayed when there are known issues, typically with your accounting data that are contrary to the upload process. If you're using QuickBooks Online Accountant, you now get that detailed report that will give you all of the irregularities that need to be resolved. And so this message is present when you're using QuickBooks Online as opposed to QuickBooks Online Accountant for uploading purposes. And here is a similar message that there was a problem. And once again, you'll notice down here at the bottom, there's a place where you can actually link to more information specific to your situation and the known issues. Now, this message deals with sales tax related issues, and we most commonly see this when trying to upload MAC data, but on occasion, if sales tax has been improperly set up in desktop for Windows QuickBooks, you can also get this error. And you have to ensure that the adjustments that you make relative to sales tax are retroactively updated for your transactions. And of course, that may present changes to your accounting data. So you'll want to ensure that you have a backup of your QuickBooks desktop data before you make those changes. And as I mentioned, here's the exact same error, but in the MAC conversion. And we do tend to see this more commonly. And you'll have to add a % symbol in the field. You normally don't have to do that in the Windows version because it's considered a % by Windows, but that's different in Mac. And if we can get this customer balance message that the balances are off, because of the way that certain payments were applied to invoices. You won't see this in the profit and loss report, but if you use journal entries to apply payments to your customers' invoices, then the import drops the link between journal entry credits to the invoices once they're in QBO. And so you're going to have to actually go through and try to resolve those problems in QBO, or go back into desktop and resolve the problems there by linking actual payments to the invoices rather than using journal entries. This will be one of the errors that's reported when you upload your data and you get that report. And here's the old connection timed out. And there was something that caused your browser to time out while you were attempting to upload your data. It could be from your internet connectivity, it could be from the browser, it could be a hibernation or sleep mode setting in. So you need to make sure that you have those things turned off, and that you're trying to upload your data probably during periods of internet usage that are not peak for your company or your place of business. And then Intuit suggests that you wait and try again after you've restarted your browser. Now we want to look at some of the message errors. And while many QBO errors have numeric identifiers, there are a variety of errors that are reported only by messages. So here's one of those error messages. A network problem has occurred. QuickBooks Online displays this message when a portion of a page has not been fully downloaded to your browser. Problem can occur if there's a communications breakdown between Intuit servers and your computer. To resolve this, you should first try reloading, or that will download the entire page. If the problem still occurs, you should close your browser, then open a new browser window and log in again. Error. An internal error occurred. Please try later. You can get this message if you're using Internet Explorer due to default settings under browser history. If you're one of those who just insists on using Internet Explorer, you may need to change your browser history settings such that you check for new versions of stored pages every time you visit the web page. And you do that under the Internet Explorer Internet Options Browser History Settings. Error. Another customer, vendor, or employee is already using this name. Please use a different name. This occurs when you have duplicate names. To resolve this error, you need to change names. Examples of the same name might include Jane Doe versus Jane D. Doe or Jane Diane Doe. If you have more than 3 employees with the same name, you can also utilize periods to differentiate between the employees. And you can use other ways like V for vendor, E for employee, etc. If you start making these changes, Intuit recommends using extreme caution when creating transactions, as the names can now be confusing. If you're unable to resolve this error using these steps, then you need to contact QuickBooks Online Customer Care. Here's a message about a particular customer cannot be deleted because there are unbilled charges for this customer. If you're receiving this error, it means that you have unbilled charges and you either add them to an invoice or delete the charges, or if it's a bill or time entry, you either need to delete them or unmark the bill billable option. And here's a very similar situation in which the employee cannot be deleted because it's associated with time tracking user or is used in unbilled time activities. And you can track down all of the time tracking activities and unbilled charges using the time activities by employee detail report. And then once you've found those, you can either apply those as they need to be applied, or you can delete them. And so, believe it or not, we are now ready for our second CPE keyword. And our second CPE keyword is Riptide. Now, when I was down at Scaling New Heights in Bahamas, I walked out into the ocean and I thought that I was about to be sucked under by the riptide. Instead, I was actually just swept down, but I know that in many areas we have riptides along the beaches. And so you want to write down this as your second keyword so that you get it right at the quiz at the end. Second keyword is riptide. Once again, our second CPE keyword is riptide. And one last time, if you didn't get it, our second CPE keyword is riptide. So this error message, you may only work on one company at a time, appears if you press the Control N and open a new tab within the browser, or you choose File and then New from within the browser to start the second company. When the new window opens, it shares all session information with the original window, including authentication. As such, you can only be in one company at a time if you launch the additional window in this way. To work around this error, you must use a different browser. Stay logged in to the original company on the Windows desktop, click the Start menu, select a different browser than you're currently using. For example, if you've got QBO in Internet Explorer, then the second company should use Firefox or Google Chrome, and then log into an additional company. If you're unable to resolve this problem using these steps, contact QuickBooks Online customer support. An error message when trying to view or pay a QBO invoice. In most cases, the error message explains what to do next. If not, there may be a problem with the network or website in which you are trying to get the data. If the error is not related to your network, your email service may have a problem handling the payment link, and you should follow these steps. Right-click on Windows or Control-click on Mac, the View Pay Now window button in the invoice email to copy the link. Paste the link directly into the address bar of your browser. If you still have trouble, try the same steps in a different browser. And if you're unable to resolve the problem, contact QuickBooks Online customer care. Error when trying to change uncategorized income and expense account. You can't merge, delete, change this account because it is reserved for online banking features. You can receive this error when trying to modify either an uncategorized income or expense. When downloading transactions from the banking page, these special accounts are used and they can't be changed since the banking features are tied to those accounts. So you can't delete them, merge them, or change the accounts of those types. You can change the name, add a number, set the account as a sub-account, or add a description. Insufficient data for image error message when opening PDF attachments. If you see this message when trying to open a PDF that you've been sent as email attachment, it's because you have an older version of Adobe Reader installed. To resolve the problem, you have to upgrade Adobe Reader. Here's another internet script error, and it's specifically related to a PDF problem. You need to ensure that you have the most recent Adobe Reader. Now we want to look at some of the QuickBooks Online numeric banking errors. Error 102 typically means that your bank's website is experiencing technical difficulties, or it might be undergoing maintenance, or it could be that there is a data transfer server issue. Potential resolution includes if you see no indication of the problem or maintenance on your bank or credit card website, then attempt to manually update your account within QBO. Click the Update button in the upper right corner. It's probably best to attempt this update and then repeat it 2 additional times during non-peak hours. You should also attempt to log into your bank's website via the URL the bank has provided for online banking. Error 103 occurs when your login credentials entered in QuickBooks Online aren't being accepted by your financial institution's website. It means that Intuit has stopped trying to process your login request until your bank updates the login information in QuickBooks Online. So the bank or credit card does not block out your access to the bank's website. In order to fix this error 103, you need to either click the Fix It link that displays after the error message and then re-enter your bank login credentials. If you don't see the Fix It link or there are indications of a different type of problem or maintenance, you can try to manually update your account within QuickBooks Online. Click the Update button in the upper right corner. If that doesn't work, you may need to contact your bank to ensure what the status of their server is and whether you can actually then log in using the bank's login website. Error 108 means there's a message on your bank's website that requires you to take action. Some examples of bank messages include new terms of service or special offer or an announcement regarding maintenance or any number of other site changes. To solve the 108 error, you have to sign into your bank's website and work through any messages that require your acknowledgement. You have to make sure all messages are gone before you go back to QBO and then attempt a bank update. Error 109 means your bank's website is requiring you to update your password and so it may actually appear in this method. Again, we see the inherent logic, error logic, and it actually points you to where you can sign into your bank's website and update your password there. Then you go back to QuickBooks Online and you attempt to update using your new password. Error 155 typically means that your financial institution is not currently allowing connection with QuickBooks Online. You may need to contact your bank to request that they allow the connection, or you may need to contact your bank to find out whether you're using the correct connection methodology. Error 185 generally means that your financial institution is requiring more information than Intuit's QBO can store. This error is common with certain multi-factor authentication account types, which means that there's an additional security requirement beyond the user ID and password that can be stored in QuickBooks Online. Here's an example of where the inherent logic displays message or error 185. You may be able to resolve this error 185 by running 3 to 5 manual updates. Once you've completed your first update, run the manual update at least 2 more times and up to 4 more times. The subsequent updates won't duplicate any transactions. If you're not prompted to answer additional security information, your automatic updates should begin to work normally. If you're asked to answer additional security questions on the second manual update, then the automatic updates won't work for this financial institution. You're going to need to run manual updates for this bank and answer the security question each time you perform the manual update. I'm having a little bit of problem with these slides advancing. Anyway, here's error 187, meaning that the wrong answer was entered for the 2-factor authentication question that was asked. You can try these possible resolutions. Ensure that you can log into your bank site through the online bank URL the bank has provided. Then attempt to perform a manual update on your account within QuickBooks Online. After you've connected successfully via a manual update, your automatic updates should work from that point forward. If none of these work, it may be necessary for you to contact your bank to reset your 2-factor authentication. Error 192 means your bank requires a layer of security that is not allowing QuickBooks Online access because they contain an ever-changing code that requires access to your account, and only you can access the code. Error 192 is known to be caused by a security feature called SafePass, which Bank of America has begun using. If you're attempting to connect to Bank of America and you're getting this error, you must first remove the SafePass security feature from your Bank of America account. You'll need to consult technical support with Bank of America to learn how to turn off the SafePass feature. Error 310 typically means that the user's name and password are not being accepted by their bank. To fix error 310, you have to verify that the user's name and password you are using are accepted at the bank's website directly. Check that you can log in at the bank site through the URL the bank provided for online banking. If your login information is accepted, then you will need to manually update your account in QuickBooks Online. Error 323 occurs due to one of the following reasons. You have two accounts with the same account name and account number, or at least the last four digits are the same. In this case, you have to attempt to rename one of the accounts at the bank's website to uniquely identify the account, and then try adding the accounts again in QuickBooks Online. Or you may have added the same account to QuickBooks Online twice, and you must disconnect one of the accounts from QuickBooks Online. If neither of these is the cause, then you need to contact QuickBooks Online support to help you resolve the matter. Error 325 indicates that your account is still in the process of downloading transactions from your financial institution. The solution is to just wait a while. Error 9995, even though this is a high number, it's still a bank-related error. This means that the bank you are connected to is no longer supported. This can be bank-related, but it can also be bank feeds-related. To fix the issue, remove the impacted bank account from bank feeds, then reconnect the impacted bank account to bank feeds. If that doesn't work, you're going to need to contact your bank. Error 9999. This is what is known as the highly technical erradiculous error, meaning an error within an error. Error 9999 may occur even when you're attempting to update bank account information to resolve another bank information-related error. To resolve this error, you want to use Intuit's recommended general bank error procedure. Wait for the next overnight update or try a manual update. Once you've completed an update, run the manual update at least 2 more times. Don't worry, the subsequent updates won't duplicate any transactions. If you're not prompted to answer additional security information, then your automatic update should begin to work. If you answered additional questions on the second manual update, then automatic updates aren't going to work for your financial institution, and you'll need to run manual updates for this bank and answer security questions each time. Now we want to look at some of the various QuickBooks Online payroll errors that are associated with QBO. While there are a large number of numeric errors associated with QuickBooks Online Payroll for QBO, the majority fall within some troubleshooting methods. So, the most common causes of QBO, QuickBooks Online Payroll errors, are messages associated with attempting to access payroll from QuickBooks Online, messages associated with attempting to open lists, messages associated with attempting to edit lists, messages associated with attempting to delete list data, errors associated with undetermined origins, error messages associated with attempting to process payroll or paychecks, which of course is why you're using payroll to begin with. Errors associated with attempting to process paychecks without having properly set up all of the information prior to trying to do so. Messages associated with attempting to view or open payroll tax payments. Error messages associated with attempting to open or process state tax payments. And error messages associated with cache and cookie conflicts. Intuit has some general instructions for these types of errors. First, you should log out and then log in again. And if you continue to experience the same issue, then you need to clear the cache and cookies from your browser. We're going to look at that in a few minutes. And then you should try using another browser. Of course, the recommended browser is Chrome, or you should attempt using an incognito window in Chrome. Just click the 3 lines under the red X and select New Incognito Window. So we want to cover our third keyword, which is Fantastic 4. Our next CPE keyword is Fantastic 4. I don't know if you like the Fantastic Four movies, but I used to read all of the Fantastic Four comics when I was growing up. And yes, there were comics that long ago. So the third CPE keyword is Fantastic 4. Fantastic 4. So we want to talk about clearing your cache and cookies. I told you that we were going to look at this, and I'm sure that all of you know exactly what I mean, but cookies are one of my favorite things, and that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about cookies, which are files created by websites you visited and your browser's cache. And they're intended to help returning web pages load faster so as to make it easier for you to browse the web. A couple of adverse effects can result from cache and cookies. They can consume valuable computer resources. It's like you acquire so much cash that the bank simply tells you you're going to have to take some of your money and put it in another bank. We just don't have room for all your cash. Or you can't gobble up the cookies as fast as your mom bakes them, and so they just pile up in the cookie jar until it overflows onto the counter. The second thing that occurs is that your computer becomes so reliant upon the stored information that it doesn't notice that the page has changed. It just continues to display the same page without truly refreshing. I see this a lot when I am working on the back end of that stupid website we use for Insightful Accountant. I'll change something and it doesn't change. I hit refresh, it still doesn't change. I hit refresh again, nothing. Finally, I log out, then I log back in, and maybe it's changed and maybe it hasn't. I may just have to dump my cookies to get it to reload the new page. And that dumping is what we properly call clearing your cache and cookies. Clearing your browser's cache and cookies means that the website settings like users' names and passwords will be deleted. As a result, some sites might appear to be a little slower because of all the images that have to get loaded again. Now, to clear your cache and cookies in Internet Explorer, you have to select Tools via the gear icon, then Safety, then delete the browsing history. If the menu bar is hidden, you have to press Alternate to make it visible. Then you have to deselect Preserve Favorites on the website and select Temporary Internet or Temporary Internet Files and Website Files, Cookies, and Website Data. Then you finally get to where you can delete it. My gosh, how many steps are they going to make you go through just to delete your cookies? In Chrome, it's much easier. Open Chrome on your browser toolbar, click the Chrome menu, click More Tools, clear the browsing data. It's just that simple. And in Firefox, it's not much more difficult. Click the menu button, choose History, then clear Recent History. You can select how much history you want to clear. From the drop-down menu, select time range to clear, and then select the details. Now we're going to look at just an example or two of these different types of problems. We're going to rush on through this because I don't want to get so tied up in all of this, but you've got it in the slides. And so one type of problem associated with payroll error messages is simply trying to access QuickBooks Online. Here's one of the errors that's very common. But there are numerous errors that all present with the same type of problem, even though they present with a different error code. These errors result from the Intuit payroll servers being offline. So you have to simply wait. Now, here are two error messages that are associated with attempting to open a payroll list. It could be employees, it could be paychecks, it could be payroll taxes. In any of these cases, you have to log out and log in. If you experience the same issue, then clear the cache and cookies. And if you continue to experience the same problem, then contact technical support. Error code 1405-4331-04901 is an example of a payroll error associated with attempting to open or edit a payroll list, like an employee or employee information. But guess what? The steps are just exactly the same as what we've covered. Log out, then log back in. If you still have problems, clear your cache and cookies. And if you still have problems, then contact technical support. There are more than a dozen payroll errors associated with attempting to delete payroll list elements. And even though there are all these different errors, the same steps apply. Reset your situation by logging out, logging back in, clearing the cache and cookies if necessary, and finally contacting technical support if you can't resolve problems. And we have problems associated with errors of undetermined origin. And guess what? Nobody has a clue as to what the cause is, and so nobody has a clue as to really how to resolve it. So you have to punt to the old standby, log out, log back in, clear the cache and cookies, contact technical support. You know, you use payroll to process paychecks. And one of the most obnoxious kinds of errors you get is when you actually are trying to process paychecks. You can get an error like this 14, 19, 45, 62, 448, 80. But it's just another example, and the same old scenario applies as to how to try to resolve it. We're going to see that almost all of these are exactly the same in terms of the way that you resolve them. But this is the one that really is different. Sometimes payroll errors can be our fault. Believe it or not, I guess it's possible that we or our clients didn't do the things that were needed to be done before we tried to start processing paychecks. This error 1414-0837-81-490 is an example of where not everything that had to be set up was properly set up before we attempted to process our first paycheck. And fortunately, Intuit has given us a link that is shown here at the bottom of the slide that takes you to a knowledge-based article where you can see all of the various steps that have to be completed before you actually begin to process paychecks. We're getting close. There's only a few more of these payroll-related errors. One such error that's more generic when attempting to open or process payroll-related activity is 1405 5427 97356. But even though it begins with the same basic steps, you have to ensure that all the information is set up. So if this begins at with payroll taxes, then after you've logged out and logged back in, you need to go back to the Payroll Tax Center, go back to payroll taxes, and click to see if you can get started with payroll or continue payroll. And if so, then you'll probably be able to work yourself through the entire process. Otherwise, you may have to go back out, log in again after clearing your cache and cookies, and hopefully that'll resolve the problem. So now we want to look at tools for safeguarding, troubleshooting your QuickBooks Online data. And this is one of the areas that when I presented this at the Scaling New Heights conference, that more pro advisors had interest in this section, and so I've saved a little extra time to ensure that we get through all of it because we do know that there are a lot of issues when working with QuickBooks Online, and that in the past, many of us have developed expertise in working with desktop data, but we haven't felt as comfortable in working with online data. And hopefully now we're seeing that there are more tools being made available whereby we can work with the online data to resolve issues as well as, extract or inject data from QuickBooks Online or to QuickBooks Online. And some of the tools that are being developed for QuickBooks Online are being developed by some of the same companies that for years have been developing utilities to work with QuickBooks Desktop. So the first area we want to look at is tools for safeguarding QBO data. One of the features and sale points of QBO is that you never have to worry about backing up your data. Intuit is continually backing up our QBO data within their overall multi-server environment. Safety copies of the data exist so that if one server goes down, the copy of the data is resident on another server. But users essentially have no control over the use of those backups. There's no way we as users can simply decide to restore our data from some past point certain and start moving forward again. In other words, the QBO backup functionality Intuit provides is aimed at restoration of a file at the point it becomes no longer available. It really is about disaster recovery, not selective restoration. Another option Intuit provides is the ability to download a copy of your QBO data in actually two different formats. One is a simple download. You have a copy of the data. What is that good for? There really is nothing you can do with that copy. Of course, you can also download a copy of your data in QuickBooks Desktop format. But there are problems with that. It takes a lot of work to deal with the differences in format. And sometimes even Intuit Data Services cannot give you a completely clean copy that is identical in desktop format to your online data. Think about it. In just the area of inventory valuation, your QBO inventory data was valued at FIFO, but your desktop uses average cost. How could the values ever truly be in balance? But none of these options come close to dealing with what I want to call a worst-case scenario. So let's look at an example of a worst case. A disgruntled employee apparently spent the entire day yesterday randomly deleting transactions, erroneously editing other transactions, and also adding a ridiculous number of fictitious transactions in your QuickBooks Online data. This morning, you find the employee's note on your desk telling you to essentially go to. And within a short time, you realize that your financials are so out of whack that you haven't got a clue how you can possibly get them right. Besides calling the police department to file charges, how would you resolve that problem? The problem of your QBO data. Can you realistically expect some restoration of your QBO data to a date certain? Well, you could if you're using this tool to safeguard your QBO data. In our worst case scenario, your best friend in the QBO environment is an app called SafetyNet. SafetyNet is the only backup utility for QuickBooks Online that you control. With SafetyNet, no matter what Intuit is doing in the way of backup, you control your own set of backups of your QBO data, and you control the restoration of your QBO data from the list of your backups. When and if it becomes necessary to restore a SafetyNet backup to your active QBO subscription, the program will first delete any new records created since the backup you've selected to restore, and it will then restore any missing records, and finally it will edit any transactions that have since been altered. Thanks to SafetyNet, our worst-case scenario was resolved by simply restoring the backup SafetyNet made the day before the day of the employee. As much as it seems so, I don't want you to think that SafetyNet is a panacea, because unfortunately it isn't a full backup of all of your QBO data. Due to limitations in the QuickBooks Online API that we talked about, 80 minutes or so ago, Intuit has currently made all of the objects within the QBO file accessible. And so since not all of those are accessible, things like deposits and sales tax and a few others like recurring transactions simply can't be recreated at present. There are other data objects like your settings and attachments that won't be included in SafetyNet backups either, but still, it's the best way and it provides you better than no self-controlled backup at all. Now let's look at some tools associated with manipulating QBO data. As I mentioned, within the last 18 to 24 months, a lot of tools have emerged for QuickBooks Online, and here are some of those. A few of these QBO desktop utility developers like Zed and Atex and Baystate have been around for years and given us a lot of our desktop tools. Many of the other QBO utility developers are new kids on the block who have chosen to focus only on the QuickBooks Online app. So, don't ask me why that went backwards. Here are some of the apps that are available for the import of data into QBO files. They include Access Import, Business Importer, Excel Transactions, Guru Importer, IIF Importer for QBO, QODBC for QBO, Transactions Plus, and Transactions Pro Importer for QBO. Access Import has been around a long time, and it imports all types of files, including IIF files. One of the things that's unique is it's a desktop product that connects to QBO. Business Importer imports most file types. Excel Transactions imports most file types, and Guru Importer imports only IIF journal entries into QBO. IIF Importer for QBO from a tax imports transactions and lists based in IIF file format. QBO ODBC is full write access to QBO. Transactions Plus imports most file types. And Transaction Pro Importer for QBO by our old friends at Baystate imports most file types. Okay, so here are a list of tools that we can use to extract and in some cases delete en masse certain data from QBO files. These include Axis, which will export QBO data to Excel, Bulk Deleter, which will bulk delete data from QBO, QODBC for QBO, which has full read, write, edit, and delete capabilities in QBO, and Transaction Pro Deleter by Baystate, which will remove transactions from QBO. And so here's a couple of examples. They include Bulk Deleter and Transaction Pro Deleter. You know, I just want to say that over the past several years, more and more pro advisors have become data specialists and are learning more and more about data. And most of them have focused on desktop. But you really do have an opportunity to become a QuickBooks Online data specialist as well. And many of the tools that we've just reviewed go a long ways in giving you the ability to not only import data and extract data, but also manipulate data. And of course, one of the best of those is QODBC for QBO. QODBC has been around a long, long time. And in fact, was partners with Intuit, and QODBC was offered as a part of the enterprise product for desktop. And their product for QuickBooks Online should serve as a learning point for anyone who's interested, because they have great resources on not only how the data within QBO is structured, but how you access that data through the APIs. So I'm ready to open it up for a few questions, and I know I have some that were sent to me. So I want to deal with a few of those specifically, if I can get my glasses on, because they appear pretty small on the screen. So Jennifer wrote, asking, Murph, I recently encountered a bank error 168 that you didn't cover. Can you tell me what causes that error? Well, actually, error 168 is one of three errors, error 106, error 168, and error 324, that may be associated with a closed bank account or an account that's no longer configured at the bank's end for online activity. Now, if you know that your account is not actually closed, you can attempt a manual update of the login information. If the problem still exists, disconnect the bank account in QBO and attempt to reestablish the bank connection. If that still doesn't work, then you're going to need to contact your bank to verify that for some reason they haven't closed your account. My old friend Peter writes in asking, this isn't really QBO related, but it does have to do with bank feeds in QuickBooks Desktop. And since you're a desktop guy too, can you tell me why, when I'm attempting to connect to online bank feeds, I get a system type initialization exception error. Well, you know, just last week we got an advisory about that, and it's a relatively new error that Intuit has been researching, and they found out that it isn't related to QuickBooks Desktop or bank feeds at all. It actually represents an error that's associated with QuickBooks isn't able to access a particular XML file due to restricted user permissions. A lot of people experiencing this problem are using QuickBooks Desktop in a hosted, terminal service, or Citrix environment. You either need to ensure that the program data folder and all subfolders and files have full permission, or you may need to contact your hosting provider or web services IT staff for assistance with this error. Karen has asked, is QBO less prone to the types of data corruption we've seen at desktop when working with multiple third-party products? That's an outstanding question, and one to which I have to say a resounding yes. Part of the safeguards I mentioned near the start of today's session deal with methods built into the QBO app platform to protect and standardize the third-party apps that are either accessing your data for read purposes or pushing data to your QBO file for write purposes. QBO is a great product, and it's getting better with the releases that update the program almost every month. One of the other reasons it is in many ways better than desktop is because of the wide variety of apps that exist to provide each user with a custom feature set. But without strict conformity to a set of standards, that could present a problem. But Intuit has taken the steps to ensure compliance with the APIs in order to preserve the integrity of each user's data. And finally, Tiffany asks, is there a course that provides the same level of information about the various actual accounting problems and troubleshooting for the conversion of QuickBooks Desktop data to QBO? Well, we talked about one or two accounting-related issues in converting. Our focus was really on the technical issues associated with converting. I'll have to say that a few months back, as I mentioned, one of the QBO product updates related to the conversion process when using QBO Accountant and providing that detailed conversion report. It's an outstanding report. But even with that said, Tiffany, you've hit on the idea for a future course, something probably like troubleshooting desktop to QBO conversion related accounting. And there certainly is sufficient content to consume an entire 90 or 100-minute class. So maybe that'll be offered in the future. And lastly, I want to say that we are nearing the end of our session, and so I want to thank everyone. I want to mention once again that you need to be sure that you take the quiz and that you select all of the keywords in order to qualify for the 1.5 hours of CPE credit for this course. And I want to thank everybody for attending and just tell you to go out and enjoy the interaction with the other VCon participants, instructors, and vendors. And hopefully this fall I'll see you at the road shows that the Woodard Group is putting on. So with that said, I will just say bye to everyone.